Alrighty, so yeah, welcome to today's presentation. So we're going over, I guess, tips for how to make a really awesome presentation for the judges at Nationals in Melbourne in August, which is next month. So we've got some special guests with us today. We have Brett Findlay from FourPL. Brett is one of our iAwards champions and does a lot of work for the AIIA. So Brett was actually one of our judges in round one. So he's going to present today I guess with his experience and expertise from a judge's perspective, and give you some tips on what the judges are looking for on the judging days in August. And I'd also like to introduce to you David Soutar. David is from Wattcost, and David works a lot with startups and does a lot of mentoring with presentations and making really awesome pictures as well. So I'd like to welcome Brett and David, and they'll be jumping in throughout the presentation as well. So just to go over what we're going to be talking about today, so we've got a bit of an overview, we're looking at some key dates. I'll just touch on the judging timetable, and it's all up on the finalist portal, so I'll give you some direction there. We've got a bit about the information memorandum, which we've actually already kind of touched on in another webinar, but we'll just go over it again today. Brett will be kind of going over the judging format and the judging criteria, and then David will come in and just give some advice on some tips to present as well. We'll be having questions at the end, so feel free to type it into the chat box. If you think of them, you can do that, and if I can answer it then and there, then I'll try. But if not, we will leave answers to the end as well, so make sure you stay around for that. Okay, so I'll just give a bit of an overview on, I guess, where we're at. These next slides were covered in a briefing about 2 weeks ago that we did online as well, so we've got a recording for that. So I can definitely resend that link around when I send the link to this recording as well. But just to reiterate for everyone, so all our state winners and our state merit recipients from round one judging, those who have taken an iAward home, you have now all become national finalists, which is fantastic. So this round of judging, round two, which is the national round, everyone's on the same playing field. So just to let you kind of aware of the process. So our judges aren't referring to your entry in round one. So all our judges are coming in with fresh eyes. They haven't read your round one application. So this is really I guess you're sort of making your mark for the first time in a way, and everyone's on the same playing field. So that's why we have the information memorandum that we'll talk about in the next few slides. So it kind of gives the judges that background information about who you are and your really cool innovations. Entrants who did take out an award in more than one category, that means that you'll be pitching in more than one category as well. So you will need to do multiple presentations in that sense. We have a finalist portal as well, so we have lots of information in there, so I encourage you to check it out. So it's information on logistics, judging criteria, the timetable, bits and pieces, so make sure you do check it out. And finalists are also responsible for their own travel and accommodation. So that's kind of an overview there. Just some key dates. So we've got our information memorandum that's due on the 14th of August. The process of that will be that you need to submit it through AwardsForce, and that's the system that you use to submit your application. So I'm actually working on that in the process, so you'll be getting some more communications on how to do it. But basically, I'll be emailing you a special link, and that link will direct you straight to your application form. So you can just click on it, and then you don't even need to be logged in. You can just click on it and then upload your information memorandum. I'll be sending some more instructions about that soon, and lots of reminders, of course. And of course, we have our judging on the 28th and the 29th in Melbourne at KPMG. Then on the 30th of August, we have our program, which includes Pitchfest. Pitchfest will be held at the Cisco building in Melbourne, and alongside the Pitchfest, we also have an innovation showcase. And then that evening on the 30th, we'll have our National iAwards Gala Dinner, and the students will have the opportunity to showcase at the Gala Dinner. So we've kind of split up the showcase over the day. And then we have a PICTA, which is the Asia Pacific ICT Awards, and that's held in Guangzhou in China. So that's in October. So it's only 5 weeks after nationals are announced. So if you are a national winner or merit recipient, then you actually need to be ready within a week to make that decision if you're ready to go over to China, because we need to submit your application. You need to apply for visas, which all takes time as well. So that's a bit of a snapshot there. Okay, so an email was sent on Monday, and it sent you the link to download the timetable. So we've done our best to, I guess there's 133 presentations that will be going on over 2 days. So we've really done our best to try to make sure that it's, I guess that it works for everyone. There are some people with doing more than one pitch, so we've had to make sure that there's no clashes, and so on and so on. So if there are any concerns, feel free to email, because we might be able to work something out. But it will usually stand as it is, and there probably isn't much flexibility in the movements that we can make. And just also be mindful that we have the same judges judging every single entry in the one category. So there's just lots of variables that we needed to work around to make sure that every entry could be judged fairly. So do check that out, and yeah, let me know if you do have any concerns, and we can see if we can help in any way. Okay, so the information memorandum. So this was also just touched briefly in our webinar about 2 weeks ago with Fulvio, who's our chief judge. But just to reiterate, so the one pager is due on the 14th of August, needs to be in PDF format. We've got a question in the chat box that says, can it be more than 450 words? As long as it's on a page, that's all I'm going to say. The judges aren't going to be counting the words, so that's fine, but it just needs to be readable for the judges, and it just needs to fit on that one page. So your information memorandum is to accompany your pitch. So I guess if I was a judge, and maybe Brett can chime in, but maybe when you're setting up in that in your session, you've got 3 minutes to set up, the judges will probably be reading your application then. And reading that one pager, and then once you've left, or throughout the presentation, they'll be probably looking at it as well and listening to your pitch, and then once you've left, they also might refer to it again as they're sort of putting their scores together as well. So it's basically there just to accompany and just to reinforce your presentation. So they do encourage that logos and graphics are used, and think about who your audience is. So it has to be, so if you're in the business services market, for example, it has to be sort of that focus. And then if you're also in R&D, then you have to do another one that has that R&D focus. So really think about who is the, I guess, the audience, I guess, of that document. So that's pretty much it. Brett, do you have any comments on the information memorandum that you want to make?
No, probably the only, hello everybody, probably the only comment I would make is be sensitive to the fact that the judges will have probably started judging from 9 o'clock. It'll be pretty heavy, and they, following your presentation, they'll do another session almost directly after. They have a slight debrief and a pre-brief. So, make them concise. If you have some nice graphics, something that will truly engage and communicate your message and your submission, then I would encourage you to do that. 450 words is again, I guess, the maximum. And to Elizabeth's earlier point, they're not going to read. They will read the information based on time, but just be sensitive to the fact that they will be doing back-to-back judging.
Great, thanks, Brett. I think that's it for this slide, so we'll move on to the next one. So the pitch format, I might just chime in on more logistic stuff, and if Brett, you have any sort of perspective from a judge, please chime in as well. But in terms of the format from a logistics point of view, so we've allocated 30 minutes to every presentation, or every presentation. So we do want you to arrive early, and we recommend 30 minutes prior to judging. So when you arrive, there will be a reception area, and you'll sign in, and we will direct you to the Finalist Lounge. And the Finalist Lounge is right next to the judging rooms, really. So that's where you wait, and the judges will come and collect you at the specified time. You can also, there will be a couple of spare rooms to test your presentation. So we did mention this at the previous webinar, but just be mindful, we haven't put any timing to that. So it's kind of an in and out, first in, best dressed situation. So just be mindful that when you are testing, that you want to make sure that you're only testing, and you're mindful of the other participants that need to use a space. But also just be mindful that if you want to do a quick test, that you've allowed some time for that as well. So you'll be waiting at the Finalist Lounge, the judges will collect you, and we have allocated some time to set up. So it's basically just plugging your laptop in. Cords should all be set up, but if you've got any, especially Macs, Macs need a special adapter. There's HDMI ports in the rooms, but I believe that if you've got any old computers or Macs in particular, that you probably need to bring your own adapters. So just be mindful that setup should be fairly simple for you, and if you need to think of anything that you might need during that setup, make sure you bring it with you. Then you'll go into your pitch for 10 minutes, and the judges have allowed for up to 10 minutes for Q&A. And as Fulvio said in our last debrief, it kind of depends. The Q&A is up to 10 minutes, but it could even be for 3 minutes. And it kind of depends on the level of detail that you've gone into your presentation, how thorough you've been. So that really kind of will vary. So don't stress if it's not the full 10 minutes, but that's why we say up to 10 minutes. And then we've allowed some time to pack down, and then the judges will probably spend the next 10 minutes roughly just scoring and going over your information memorandum, and just putting those scores into the system. We have an opportunity for students and startups to also receive some verbal feedback. So students, you'll get that feedback during the pack-up stage, and the startups, you will actually leave the room, the judges will deliberate, and then give you some worthwhile feedback face-to-face after that. We have, the rooms are going to be quite small, so that's why we've said max 4 people in the room. But I think David might talk about what he recommends. The number should be of people presenting, but you can have up to 4. If you are a student and you want a guardian to be there, it's definitely possible, but the guardians won't be doing anything other than just being in the room for moral support. So the students will be doing their own setting up, their own presentations and all that. And we have about 4 to 6 judges in each room, so just be mindful of that as well. So Brett, was there anything that you wanted to add about the pitching format?
Yeah, look, yeah, thanks, Liz. It probably, for those that present regularly to clients and for those that don't necessarily present to clients or business partners or, teachers or whomever, probably just to manage expectations, the KPMG building is a beautiful building, but it's also quite intimidating. Yeah, it's very well presented and the facilities are great. But I think just to echo Liz's earlier comments, if you have some specific present, or you're bringing along a presentation device, make sure you have all of the what you need, whether they be VGA connections or HDMI connections, or an iPad connection, but whatever you need, just bring just in case as a backup, because there'll be nothing worse if you're getting in there and you find that you don't have all the right tools, and then you're wasting the judge's time, and you're wasting your time, quite frankly. So the other comment in terms of logistics, you will be. We typically, when we do the judging, we typically nominate a judge to go along and collect the groups that are coming in to present. So you'll be met by one of the judges, then the judges will sit down and they'll let you set up. And probably a really key point again in terms of the time allocated, the time is very strict. So if you run over time, you will be asked to actually, there'll be a time reminder, but you'll be asked to actually stop your presentation. And the reason why we do this, and look, having been a judge really for the last, I'm going to say 6-7 years now, the reason why we do this is purely about having a level playing field for the other presenters and making sure that everybody has the time allocated. And so, not to labour the point, but make sure you do arrive early, make sure you've got all of the right things that you need to present. Make sure your presentations themselves are very tight, so well rehearsed, and obviously the judges will guide you through the Q&A. The Q&As, what we typically do as judges, we do try and each ask a question. Sometimes the judge is has more questions because it could be something quite technical. And then with that, they will probably spend more time asking the questions. But we have a timekeeper and we're very, very strict on that. So that's probably the only other thing that I would like to add to the judging format. We'll talk about presentation format in, I think, the next slide.
Yep. Okay, so this is the judging format. So yep. Brett. Yep,
so yep, thanks, Liz. So probably I mentioned earlier about presentation. Now David will go through and talk about the best way to present. But I probably want to share with you a couple of things in terms of your presentation. If you are going to come in with 4 people, as the maximum is allowed, make sure everybody is clear as to what they're going to say. It's nothing worse for the judges if you've got people talking over each other, if you're, I guess, flapping between different presenters, if technically you haven't got the right answers. It makes it particularly uncomfortable for you, and particularly with the time constraint. The other really, really important point is the criteria is designed to make sure that you can hit the brief. So what happens post your presentation is we as judges will score your presentations, and so we'll have the name of your submission up, we'll have the percentage of allocation, and we will score you accordingly. But what's key is that you present in the format that we've asked you to present in, because we will evaluate that way. And I'll go through in just a minute the criteria for each of the overall responses, or categories rather, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But I think the other thing, and again, David will talk about this in terms of presentation style, but if you come in and you just put up a sales brochure or a business plan or something that is not necessarily going to hit the criteria as we specify, you will find, and you'll be able to read the room, the judges won't be particularly responsive. But from my experience, again, historically in judging, probably the judging sessions that are the most interesting are the ones that are the most interactive. I'll just share a story. There was a young, actually I think he might have been an undergraduate, and he was promoting the exoskeleton, and he's now become a bit of a global phenomenon out of Western Australia. And he came in, he had his exoskeletons, he presented it, and it was fantastic. It was very engaging. But as I mentioned, David will talk about style in a minute, but what's key, I guess, is stick to the criteria, stick to the pitch, make sure you're organised, make sure if you've got multiple presenters there, that they're clear as to what they're going to say. Whatever you do, if you find that you can't answer a question, particularly if it's technical, then don't make it up. Then you just really take it on and say, I don't have the answer to that, or we'll follow up as required. But we've got a very tight time constraint here. Okay, next slide, please, Liz. So in terms of criteria, and just to be quite specific, I'm going to run through 3 different slides here, or actually there's 5, but 3 slides in terms of the criteria. So for the technology criteria, that includes, actually, wrong slide, market slide. We're going to focus on 50% of our evaluation will focus on the why, 30% will be on the what, and 20% will be on the how. So remembering, we will have had your 450 words or your one-pager, we will have reviewed that, and then you come in and then you present and you talk to each of these individual categories, and you'll be scored accordingly. I encourage you all to read the criteria and then prepare your presentations for each of your particular categories around those criteria. If you do that, then you'll do very well. Moving on to the technology category. Again, technology, probably the only thing I would say, and this is probably more, the weighting is clear, so that's 20% for the why, 40% for the what, and 40% for the how. The only thing I would say is that whilst from a judge's perspective, some of the judges are technical and some of the judges may not be technical. So be careful with getting too technical, because you may miss the message or your message that you want to share, and you may obviously may not hit the criteria as specified here. So just be sensitive to that and be sensitive to your audience. You won't have a chance, the judges won't introduce themselves and they won't tell you where they're from. They might introduce themselves just purely with a nice formal greeting, but that's about it. You won't know where they're from or nor their background. So be sensitive to that. R&D, the weighting will be based, 50% will be based on the why. And again, I think that the definition of the criteria is well explained there. 30% on the what and 20% on the how. So again, similarly to the previous categories, have a look at exactly what we're looking for, and make sure that your presentation is directly aligned with those criteria. You'll make the judges' role a lot easier, particularly in understanding what you are communicating. Next slide. Startup is a little bit different because in some cases you may have actually submitted the same for multiple categories. And even if you have, and I think Liz mentioned this earlier, even if you have submitted the same, make sure you do have a different presentation. Because the weighting for, let's say, the R&D category or the technology category is obviously different to the startup category, and the judges will be looking for different things. So be sensitive to that. Just don't roll out the same presentation, because again, you'll be judged accordingly, and obviously you want it to be highly in your favour. The next category is the junior and senior students. I think probably reflecting on Liz's earlier comments, we will provide some feedback and that feedback will be basically you presented well. We very much are quite careful, I guess, particularly with the junior and the senior students, because often they haven't had the opportunity to present outside of their teachers or their family or their friends. So we provide as much positive feedback, or as much feedback rather, so that they can learn from the experience, and we get some great feedback from them and from their teachers and from their guardians. So it's a good one. And undergraduates, again, I think I've labelled it based on the other categories, but the undergraduates will also get some feedback. So Liz, remind me again for the undergraduates what we do differently.
So just with the undergrads, there's just a different weighting criteria for this. So that's kind of something that we reviewed last year after judging, and we wanted to put a different emphasis on the criteria for undergrads as opposed to the junior and senior students. So for undergrads, the real emphasis, if you look at the weighting, is the how. So how have you, I guess, taken this idea and this problem, and how have you solved it with your innovation? The senior and junior students kind of are more on the what and the why.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Terrific. So look, just to probably summarise before I hand over to David, it's a great day and a great experience and a great opportunity. You've all worked very, very hard to certainly your original submission and idea has been well regarded. I know, having been a level 1 and a level 2 judge, the submissions this year were of exceptional quality, and every year that we do it, we're seeing some fantastic innovations. So congratulations for getting to where you've got to thus far. It is a great day, and I would very much encourage you to work through the detail that we've provided in today's webinar, because that'll help you to be successful, and I'm sure you'll be successful regardless. But I'll hand over to David now, and David can guide you through presenting.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, David. Thanks.
All right, terrific. So yeah, my name's David Soutar, and I do have my own tech startup that's about 6 years in the making. In our journey, we found one of the best ways of obviously winning awards like the iAwards is a skill that everybody can learn on presenting, and you need to perfect these types of opportunities for customers, investors, winning awards. We've been fortunate to win quite a few startup awards, both here in Australia and around the world. And they've opened up doors because of being able to deliver a message. So today I just wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining the formula that we've used to successfully present our ideas, and hopefully you can adapt some of those thoughts to your presentation style as well. So we call it the 3 PPs. It's all about presentation, personality, and pace. So let's go to the first slide, Liz, and I'll run through some of the ideas around presentation. So one of the most important things we found was when you're speaking to a new group of people, in this case, a new group of judges, you should always open the conversation by saying who you are, what your role is, and the company. And this is around the listeners getting a little bit familiar with your voice before you launch into your story. So this is something worth integrating into your pitch. The other thing that you want to do, you've got a fairly generous timescale here of 10 minutes. Well, some of you may not think 10 minutes is long enough, but you want to grab the judges and the audience's attention in the very first minute, because if you're able to do that, then they're much more willing to listen to what else you've got to say. And the best way of doing that is to create a hook. It takes some time to get your own hook right, but what you're trying to do is to get an emotional connection with the people you're speaking to. Now, that's just not what you're talking about, but also the way that you're standing and the way that you're looking at people. So in this case, you've got a number of judges. You should make sure you make eye contact with each of those judges while you're saying this hook. And you'll very quickly see if you've got their attention. Now, as Brett was mentioning before, it's a long day for the judges. They're going to hear a lot of people talking. So it's up to you to make sure you get their attention straight off the bat. The other thing we see with a lot of pitches is that people seem to focus too much on what they are doing right now, not about the vision. So it's not about what you currently have or what you're currently doing, it's about where you want to get to. And then all of the elements of the why, what, and how fall into place a lot neater than if you just talk about what you're doing right now. And the way you present it has got to be a story, because stories are engaging. They have a start, they have a middle, they have an end. And it's up to you to tell that story about this exciting journey that you're on, that you want the audience to come with you. So these are some of the simple techniques that we've found can engage people for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes in different formats of presenting. The other thing you want to be aware of is that, especially if we're presenting new concepts and ideas to people, is not everyone's going to get what you're talking about. So it's very powerful if you can reference everyday things that people already know about in the context of what you're doing in a new, different, exciting way. Because if you're just bombarding people with a bunch of new ideas, it's not going to be absorbed in as well as what you think it is. You know the content very well, the people you're speaking to don't know. And as you're telling that story, you want to show the real validation points that prove what you're talking about. The reason, the rationale that this opportunity and the market opportunity exists. So you've been given virtually the roadmap to your presentation, because the number one thing we've always said is we don't want to pitch if we don't know what the judging criteria is. For the iAwards, you've got it all mapped out in front of you, how you're going to be scored, so you know where to focus your talk. That makes it a lot easier, I hope. As you're talking to people and you're engaging them across this 10 minutes, and I would pretty much treat this opportunity as a 20-minute opportunity. Quite often when we're pitching, we purposely leave things out of the first part of the pitch, knowing that people are going to have to ask questions afterwards to really clarify and understand what you're talking about. It takes a little bit of time to get that formula right. But you can play around with those things, because you really do have 20 minutes to talk about your idea. And during that process, you've got to tick off these three things: that it's a big market opportunity, it's a big problem you're solving, and you have the right solution to solve that. If you can tick all of those boxes, you have a really strong presentation. And one thing that some people miss is to talk about the team, that you actually have the ability, the experience, the credibility, the passion to pull this off. You're the salesperson that's saying, this is the best idea since sliced cheese. And we have a team that's executing and ready to execute and take this further. Because that's what the judges want to see. They want to see opportunities that are believable and are credible and can be taken further. Because it makes them look good when they pick a winner that does that for them. So you've got to prove those things to them. Could I have the next one, please, Liz? Right. So Brett mentioned that up to 4 of you could present. Not a big fan of having multiple presenters on stage. It's more often than not very confusing for the audience, unless it's a well-rehearsed routine. And by well-rehearsed, I mean not just transferring from slide to slide in terms of swapping the speaker, but if you've got multiple people standing up in eyesight of the judges, then it's distracting for them. And you've got to make sure that if you're not speaking, if you're not presenting, you're not distracting from the person that is. So if there's one person that can present the whole pitch, I'd highly recommend that. You can always bring in the other people during the Q&A. So especially if there's technical questions and you're not the person who knows the technology the best, bring them on stage during the Q&A. But if you can get away with having one person presenting, it's a much more fluid experience and much easier for the judges who's been hearing your voice throughout the presentation to get the full impact of what you're talking about. Don't generally recommend people try to be a comedian, but if you can at least make the audience laugh once, it lightens up a presentation. So you might have one of those in your routine, but if you don't worry about it. It's just about creating the highs and lows during the presentation that keep people engaged. Eyesight is quite important in this type of thing. You should always be looking forward and connecting with the judges. You want to avoid turning sideways or turning your back to the judges. So if at all possible, you want to position yourself where you can see the main presentation screen, or if there's a second screen that you're able to look at, but always make sure that you're facing forwards to the people that you're talking to. As soon as you turn your back, you've changed the momentum, you've changed the body language in your presentation. So during the setup, your 2-minute setup, as well as getting the technology that you're using set up properly, look at where is best to stand so that you can both see your presentation slides and the judges at the same time. One of the techniques we tell people a lot about is just practice. Practice in front of a mirror, because you yourself are your worst critic, your harshest critic. And if you can convince yourself, you can pretty much convince anyone that this is a great presentation. So practice in front of a mirror, and it will come off much more naturally when you're doing the presentation. Avoid reading from slides and notes. There's nothing worse than listening to someone that doesn't know their content. And the best way of doing that is not to fill up your slides with a bunch of text. As soon as you fill up your slides with lots of text, people are reading the text and not listening to you presenting. So the formula that we normally use is you have 3 main points per slide, and you've got to know the content behind each of those headline points. And then you will get full engagement from the people that you're talking to. 10 minutes is probably got enough time for you to do a demonstration, or even show a video. I generally recommend not to. If you absolutely have to, as part of your presentation, make sure during the 2-minute setup, you test the video, you make sure it plays, you make sure it's connected to the speakers, do whatever you need to make sure that works before you start the pitch. There's nothing worse than getting stuck halfway through a pitch and the video's not playing. The sound's not working, you've got to rewind it. It breaks the whole momentum of the presentation. So absolutely make sure if you have to do a video or a demo, test and test it again. You're probably not going to get a chance to visit the room that you're pitching in beforehand, but if you are able to, stick your head in, just get a little bit of familiarity with it. Makes it much easier when you go in and do your pitch to know what you're walking into. And when you're talking, invite people into your world. So be open, don't have your hands folded, don't cross them in front of you. Be very open and positive in the way that you talk, and that invites people into what you're saying. Next one, please, Liz. Right, so pace is a really important thing with presenting. You're going to be presenting a bunch of new ideas. Don't speak too fast. Speak at a pace where people can easily understand what you're talking about. And then leave white space, leave space in between these major new concepts and major ideas that you're presenting so that people can absorb them. A very simple way of getting that timing is when you're talking to someone and you have eye contact and you present a new idea, their eyes will go upwards. And that's, in body language, means they're thinking about what you're talking about. So the worst thing is to keep talking while they're still thinking about what you're talking about. So make sure that you pace the presentation that allows people to do that absorbing. One of the things we always say, obviously, is you sound a lot wiser if you're talking slowly. Whereas if you talk too fast, it gives the impression that you're nervous or you haven't quite got the core of what you're talking about down. And you end up talking in circles. So people do listen better when you speak slowly. Try not to use industry acronyms or terminology or abbreviations, because if people are not from your industry, they don't know what you're talking about. So always make sure that you say the full word without using the acronyms. I've just had a question from Winter. I would recommend not using palm cards. You should definitely have your slides, and you should know the content inside out from what's on the slide. My slide decks are typically 2 or 3 statements, and I know the content behind each of those statements. And that's what you have to practice to make sure that you get up to that. Your palm notes, your cliff notes should actually be your slide deck. Okay. Once again, I've said don't show a video unless absolutely necessary. It does break the flow of your presentation. If there's several of you, then maybe another person can actually have that all keyed up, ready to go, so that it's the presenter. You can just say, roll the video, and it happens straight away. If there's any breaks in it, it is going to make your presentation very disjointed. When you're talking to people, it's very good because you should be so familiar with what you're presenting that you can spend some time looking at the audience for their reactions. And if you're speaking softly and authoritatively, it makes people lean forward in their chairs. This is a really cool trick in body language, because if you're yelling at people, they tend to sit backwards. If you're speaking softly and authoritatively, people lean forwards, and then you know you've got their attention. If people are getting distracted, you've got to pull them back in to the conversation. And you can point, I quite often point at people, judges and audience members, to pull them back into what I'm saying, to get their attention again. So body language is something that you can learn. As I said before, practice in front of a mirror. You'll get to see what is working or what's not working. When I first started pitching, I looked like a flappy bird. My arms were everywhere. I was doing the Italian wave, we used to call it. So find what works for you, but make sure it's engaging and open and people want to be part of your world while you're talking about it. Okay, so that covers the 3 Ps for presenting. There's been a couple of comments about having cards, palm cards. Look, if you absolutely have to, but I'd highly recommend that you work off your presentation deck and know what you're going to say. So if your presentation deck doesn't give you that level of information, change what it is so that it reminds you what you're going to talk about for that particular slide. As a rule, with 10 minutes, I wouldn't have anything more than 20 slides. 30 seconds a slide is a pretty good pace to talk at. If you've got 3 bullet points on each slide, that only gives you 10 seconds per slide. So, somewhere between 15 and 20 slides would be about the level I would go with. and then enjoy the day. It's your day to shine. So make it happen, be happy with it, and learn from the feedback that you get from the judges.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett and David, for your insight into presenting and judging. And I'm sure the entrants will have lots of value from this. So I think now we're probably ready for, well, here are my details. Feel free to give me a call, or you can send me an email if you do have any questions throughout this process. I'm always here to help. But right now I think is a good time that we open up to questions. So feel free to type it into the chat box, or you can even unmute yourself if it's easier to verbalize your question. Feel free to do that as well. And we're, I'm sure Brett and David and myself can answer any questions. Okay, so we've got a question about Pitchfest. So Pitchfest is taking place after judging, and the Pitchfest is the public-facing event. So that's taking place on the 30th of August. So the question is the Pitchfest pitch the same length as the iAwards one? I think it might be roughly the same. I need to check that, to be honest, because I'm not personally running the day of Pitchfest. So let me get back to everyone on that, and then we can clarify. But from what I've my experience in doing Pitchfest, it's basically you'll be judging. So you'll be presenting in your category that you would have been presenting to the judges. So it would be roughly the same format in terms of length. I just need to check that. So we'll check that and get back to you. We've got a question about embedding YouTube links in the information memorandum. I don't recommend it, only because the judges probably won't have time to be watching videos. If it's a quick 30-second one, maybe, and maybe Brett, you might want to comment on this, but I probably wouldn't. But Brett's got that judging experience. I'm not sure if he would click if he was a judge during the on the day. Brett?
Yeah, it's thanks, Liz. No, I wouldn't recommend it. I think that you've already put your best foot forward in the submission. We've reviewed that, as well as the links and other materials. We just we always have limited time, and sometimes our debriefs either run over, our pre-briefs run over. So yeah, you want to be consistent with your with the others in your category.
Yeah, and maybe that's where, I mean, if you did want to show that video, if it was vital to your presentation, maybe you want to show it during the presentation as opposed to put it in a link in the information memorandum, because it could get lost as well. So wouldn't recommend to put it in the one pager.
Could I just jump in there? If people have their videos up on YouTube, I would highly recommend getting a local copy of any video content and having it on your machine. It's unlikely you'll be able to get a permanent good Wi-Fi connection to be online. So whatever you're going to show, make sure it's on your machine.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a great point. We actually don't have Wi-Fi available to the entrants. It's all going to be used for the judges. We don't want to slow down the judging system, so we want to make sure the Wi-Fi capacity is it's just for the judges. So if you do need access to the internet, you will need to organise that yourself, your own hotspots. Okay, so Pitchfest is not compulsory. It's definitely a really cool opportunity to, I guess, give your organisation or your innovation, I guess, that time to shine, because Pitchfest is a public event. So there's going to be all sorts of people that are really interested in what you have to say that will be there on the day. So spaces are limited, so unfortunately not everyone can be a part of it. It's limited capacity, in terms of how many pitches we can do during PitchFest, and it's also not compulsory, so it's completely up to you if you want to participate. But we do have a set number of categories that can participate in. So an email went out earlier this week about the PitchFest, and there'll be more kind of being communicated as we go along. But if you are interested in participating, you can send me an email and I could put you through to the right person as well. But it's not compulsory to answer that question. We've also got another question about arriving. So we do recommend you arrive 30 minutes before the scheduled time on that timetable. So if it says your start time is 1 o'clock, we recommend you arrive no later than 12:30. And that's because it gives you time to register, so we know that you're there. It gives you time just to get your bearings, because as Brett said, the KPMG office can be quite intimidating if you're not used to sort of that type of environment. So make sure that you're there early, you have your bearings. You can even practice, test your technology to make sure the laptop and the presentation works fine. But even then, I probably, if you want to give time to test, I will probably even arrive a little bit earlier, even still, only because we're not monitoring those testing rooms. So if you want to give yourself ample time to test as well, I would even come a little bit earlier too. But we're telling everyone no later than 30 minutes before your scheduled time. We've got a question as well about having a PitchFest webinar. We won't be having one of those because basically the PitchFest presentation that you do, it's exactly what we're talking about now. So it's the same judging criteria. You're basically using your same presentation you're doing to the judges, but instead of doing it to 6 judges in a closed environment, you're now having the opportunity to really shine on a stage with a room of 100 people. So we're not doing any webinars around that, but you can definitely get lots of information in these webinars that we've been doing and put that onto your PitchFest presentation as well. So we just have a question about, what type of people will be in the room for PitchFest. It could be anyone in industry. We've got government, we've got academics that will be there. Key sponsors are going to be there as well. So it's industry professionals. It's not so much the general public going to be there. It's an industry event. So it's any one of our AAA members, our judges, our sponsors, other entrants as well. So it's a really good chance to network. Okay, there's another question from Robin. Can we make the presentation interactive by asking involving the judges? David, you might want to answer that, or Brett.
Yeah, it's Brett here. I think David can also add to, I think, my comments. Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as you don't, and David will talk about presentation style or engaging with your audience, as long as you're engaging in I guess, a positive way that's aligned with the criteria. For sure, but if you're going to run a quiz and then score the judges accordingly, you just want to be respectful of those that are judging. You don't want to offend anybody. So, David, I'm not sure if you want to make some additional comments to that.
I would say during the pitch, if the person that you're addressing, you believe they know the answer, then it's not a bad thing to ask the question. If it's something that they won't know the answer to, then it does become an embarrassment. So generally, I find if you want to involve or engage the judges in the conversation, ask them a question collectively. Ask them, a question like, okay, so how many of you dislike your energy provider? something that's non-offensive, pretty light. It engages people because they feel part of the conversation. But I would generally not pick one of the judges out of the panel with a question during the pitch.
That's great, thank you. We've got about 2 more minutes. Is there any other questions that anyone wants to ask? While we're waiting for any more questions, I just wanted to let all our entrants know that early bird tickets are on sale now for the gala dinner. Our early bird prices for entrants close on Monday, the 16th of July. So definitely make sure you get your tickets by then, and you can save some money on that. And then we'll go to the standard entrant rates from Tuesday, the 17th of July. So in the emails that we send to you, your unique code is embedded in that URL link that we send you. So where we say sort of get your tickets here, that's where your discount codes are kind of embedded in. So yeah, you've got until the 16th, but if you have any questions about that, just let me know. Winter has asked if there's any more webinars. This is it for now, but if anyone has any questions on what type of webinars or what type of topics they think would make great webinars, we're definitely open to that. So feel free to get in touch. But this is the last webinar that we've got scheduled at the moment. Dana has asked if the slides will be available. Definitely, and I am recording this webinar, so tomorrow I'll be uploading it up online and sending the link to everyone, so you can watch it as many times as you like. Alrighty, well, I think that's it. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join in on today's webinar. Thank you very much to Brett and David. Such great assets in helping all our entrants in this process along the iAwards journey. So thank you very much. And yeah, as I said, if you've got any questions, any entrants questions, do get in touch and we'll do our best to help and to answer them. But yeah, enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and we'll all see you in Melbourne. Alrighty, thank you everyone.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, thanks. Okay, bye.